Well, I wrote a second book. I didn't want to write another book. It was never part of my plan to write another book. I thought I was writing a poem. And that poem led to another poem, and that poem led to another poem, and then I figured out I was doomed. I was going to have to write a book. What was going on in my life at the time was, it was 4 years of a very, very difficult period for me because I was caretaking my mother. She was admitted to a nursing home at the age of 96. Basically, one morning she woke up and she couldn't walk. And my mother and I had always had a very toxic relationship, and I had done everything I could think of over the years, including therapy, to cope with it. But becoming her caretaker took me to a whole nother place. And I just, so many times during those 4 years, I thought I was going to lose my mind. And as it turned out, really writing this book did more to get me through that time than anything else. So it started with a poem, which I said, of course, turned into more poems. But I was even struggling with the first poem. What I was struggling with at the very beginning was my mother had to be taken to the nursing home very suddenly in the middle of like the worst winter. Does anyone remember the winter of 2014? The worst winter ever. And so it let, and my mother had never done any planning about what she wanted done at the end of her life. Oh, well, I want to die in my house. Well, gee, great, Mom, but that might not be possible. So nothing was prepared, nothing was well planned, and I was left with a huge house with a whole lot of jewelry in it. And it's a small town, and everyone's telling me, you've got to get that jewelry out of your mother's house. And I hated my mother's jewelry. I didn't even want to touch it, let alone bring it back to Chicago and put it in my house. But I did, and that's why I wrote the first poem in this book. So what really brought the book together for me, though, was this whole metaphor of my mother as a dragon. And that's the claw on the cover, the dragon's claw. And 3 poems in the book really capture what, to me, is the central essence of that character. So I guess the central character of my mother as the dragon. So I'd like to start talking about Heavy Metal, the book, by reading you those 3 poems today. The first one is called Limbo. In stories like this one, the dragons are slain by knights clad in armor with fortunes to gain. The hero, triumphant, attains his reward, the hand of the princess, the gold from the hoard. My landscape was different, my tale not the same. Only one dragon I never could tame. She clutches at memories. She whispers of doom, taunted by demons while chained in her room. There is a land beyond this one where dragons still fly, singing new melodies, painting the sky. Their hordes are forgotten when they shed human form. Their talons are blunted, their flames merely warm. Free me, old dragon, I cry for relief. I aged as your guardian, I raged as your thief. And now, just a helmsman, in waters unknown, child of the dragon, heir to the throne. In stories like this one, 3 elements blend. They have a beginning, a middle, an end. My story is endless. It just cycles on. I don't want to slay you. I just want you gone. So I wait here in limbo, not old, but not young, with poems still unwritten and songs still unsung. My past unforgotten, my future unseen, chained to my dragon in the land in between. A little further down the line, I wrote this poem called Essence. Dragons know music, they sing and they flame, but the only lyric they know is a name. They croon to their treasures, they sing to their hoards, songs made of metal with jewel-studded chords. Lost in the melody, knowing no shame, entwined in the echoes of a song and a name. The years they have journeyed the hungers that grow. These are the things that a dragon can know. Our songs are our stories. We live in our tales. We quest after wisdom and follow our grails. We grow in the telling. We learn through our arts. We broaden our knowledge and widen our hearts. We send forth our music. We mourn and rejoice. Our songs grow in power with each turning and choice. Choose your songs wisely. Find the right ear. Our songs are not things that a dragon can hear. Love not a dragon. Their hearts are too cold. They know only metal. They hear only gold. Words that will nurture, examples to live. These are not things that a dragon can give. Work spells till you're empty. Make a wish on a star. You won't change their essence. They are what they are. The love in our living, the courage to heal, these are not things that a dragon can feel. My mother did die. I had always planned that I would do or sing something for her final service. I really had no idea what it would be, but I began to get an idea. So this particular poem that I'm going to read now actually kind of came to me at the right time, almost as one complete piece. This one is called Song. I sang for the dragon, and with each golden note, release and forgiveness poured from my throat. Ribbons of color danced in my sight, gyrating and whirling in spirals of flight. Violet and yellow, magenta and green, carnation and amber and aquamarine. Their melodies weaving a ballad so pure, a tapestry rainbow in a sky of azure. Ask not of dragons what dragons can't give. Enmeshed in their anthems through the eons they live. Instead, choose acceptance, tinged with regret, and wrap them in legend, lest we ever forget. Though sometimes they hate us as we flee them and cower, they still fascinate us in their glory and power. And yet, I've heard stories of dragons who mate, confounding all logic, defying their fate. So I sing for the dragon, but the songs are for me, unchained, undivided, and finally free. It's interesting to think about how music works into the book, Heavy Metal. I am a musician. I have been since I was 4 years old and started taking piano lessons, and music is a part of everything I do. When I write verse, obviously music and meter are operating in my head all the time at a level where I don't think I even really have to think about it. Music is also really a key element of the book because it's very much tied into the whole idea of forgiveness. When I think about, my biological father, Philip, died in an airplane crash when I was 4. And he was the musical one in the family. He played the piano. I get conflicting reports on whether or not he sang. Some people said he did. Some people said he couldn't carry a tune in a basket. Who knows? But my mother thought of him as a beautiful musician. And my mother loved music. So did a couple of her brothers and sisters. They thought they could sing. They had terrible voices. But they did love music. My mom used to talk to me about how, she would play certain songs on whatever the equipment they played on then was over and over again so she could write down all the lyrics and memorize them, which was something that I did too as a child. I had original soundtracks from my favorite Broadway musicals, Camelot, My Fair Lady. I can do all those songs by memory, even now. But in those days, if you wanted to learn the lyrics of a song, you played it over and over again. You lifted up the needle and you wrote down a line and you put the needle back down, then you lifted up, So this was how song and music and rhyming and meter probably, got lodged in me when I, between the ages of like, I don't know, 5 and 12. I played the piano for 11 years under the very rigid classical instruction at my mother's insistence. We found a piano teacher in my tiny little town she was very, very good. She toured in the summers. She had studied at Juilliard, but she and my mother, they were just like, to me, they were just like these two, they were in a gang forcing me to do something I didn't want to do. My mother would spank me if I didn't practice enough. My music teacher would slap my hands against the piano keys if she didn't like the way I did something. Now, isn't this a wonderful way to get a child to love music and playing the piano? It still haunts me. I did an entire one-woman musical show back in 2019 all about my torturous relationship with music. That's another story. But it does play out in the book, and it is eventually the element that led to forgiveness in some of the final poems. It's when I think about my mother and the fact that I know she loved my father. My father loved her desperately, and he had music in his heart. And my mom would tell me about, she had a great story. Their song was Fascination. She'd say, he used to always sing it to me. Well, other people have told me my father couldn't sing. And then, I researched the song. The copyright doesn't fit, the copyright date and the years she was talking about their courtship. There's no match there, so I don't know what's going on with anything of that. But I think about my father and his love of music, and my mother with her love of music, and how they came together, and how she loved him and how she lost him. And it's when I think about those things that I can let go of a lot of all the other shit that revolves around my feelings about my mother and my relationship with my mother. I can let go of all of that and think of her as a woman who loved my father and lost him. There's a lot of that in the last poems of the book, and I'm glad it's there because it's really what got me through the questions I had about how is this book going to end? Well, Jean, you obviously have to forgive your mother. That's the way the story is supposed to end, and you haven't even done that, young lady. So it's there, and I'm glad it's there. So it is an interesting question. My mother did finally die. She was almost 101. She had outlived all her siblings, and that was one of her goals. She wanted to outlive her older sister. So she did. All the months and years I'd thought about, is it ever going to happen? How is it going to happen? What'll I do when it happens? How will I feel when it happens? It all happened very beautifully and easily. I was driving home from Michigan. A call came in. I don't normally answer the phone in the car. At least I didn't in those days. I didn't have Bluetooth. I didn't have a smartphone. In those days, I didn't answer my phone in the car. But for some reason that day I did. And it was about 10:30 in the morning, and it was someone from the nursing home. And they said, I just want you to know that your mom passed away this morning. And, I'm driving. And I said, I'll be home in about an hour. Can I call you back? And they said, yes, of course. So my mother did die in the nursing home. It was just, they got up, she had her breakfast, she insisted on doing her own hair and makeup. She always made everybody leave the room when she did that. So she fixed her hair such as she could. She put on her lipstick such as it was. And then when they went back to see her, she had slumped over in her chair and she was gone. So she died doing what she did best, going her own way, doing what she wanted to do. So all my thoughts about what am I going to do at the service, it all kind of coalesced pretty quickly and easily. But I do remember, it was one of those spooky moments, because as I was riding along in the car, I was thinking, well, my mother is going to die someday, and I will probably write a poem about it. What's it going to be called? And I thought, maybe it would be called Fade. There's a lot of words that rhyme with fade, and that was when the phone rang. So the poem Fade came out pretty quickly after that, probably that evening. I know that my husband and I, we turned around and we rode, we drove pretty quickly to Indiana, and I put the whole service together in my head from the hotel room, and I planned to sing a couple of my mother's favorite songs and read a couple of my favorite poems and just put it all together. I think it was moderately successful. I was singing pretty good in those days. I sang Fascination. That was the one that my mother claimed was her and my father's song. And I sang Unforgettable. That was my tribute to her. And it was also one of her favorite songs. She loved that song. And I sang the poem song, and I read the poem Fade, which I had written about 24 hours earlier. And an interesting that happened during my mother's service was, as always, when I read my own poems, people come up to me or my husband and they go like, "Oh my God, where'd Jean find that perfect poem?" And the answer is usually, she wrote it. But anyway, my cousin Jamie, who is a performer, she had an act going in a club in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the time. She comes up to my husband and she said, "Where did Jean get that poem?" And Ernie goes, "She wrote it." And Jamie was going like, "Oh my God, does she write a lot of poems like that?" And Ernie said, "Yes." And Jamie said, "Well, why doesn't she put them in a book?" And Ernie said, "It's in her purse." Because it was. So I would like to share with you now that poem that came to me in the car when they told me that my mother had passed. I got a date here, August 24th, 2018. Fires to embers, pillars to dust, embers to ashes, metal to rust. Silver talons now tarnished, bronze wings without sheen, eyes dull and filmy that once flashed emerald green. Spells working slowly, magic unmade, curses to blessings for a long, gentle fade. No poison-tipped javelin, no bolt from a bow, just a shake and a shimmer and a last ambient glow. Fade out all resentments, all passion, all rage. Night beckons softly as it turns the last page. The clutch of a talon, now loosened and slack, fade now to memory, at last fade to black. So as I've said before, many times and in many places, this book had a very strange path. And I was about halfway through writing poems, and oh man, I just needed a break. And I thought, I'm done. And I wrote a couple of poems that are in the book now under kind of the subheading 3 Healing Spells. And I wasn't planning on putting them in the book. They just were really a magical retelling of some things that were going on in my life at that time that were driving me crazy. But the third one I wrote was a little bit different. I eventually decided I could just label all the poems as magical spells that the character author was writing while she was, figuring some other things out. So that's the way they appear in the book. However, one poem seems to really kind of have a life of its own. I performed it during my one-woman musical show in 2019, did some kind of interesting things with it. I paired it up with a nonsense song, When You Wish Upon a Star, as kind of like what people fantasize wish fulfillment and healing is about, and then using this poem as the contrast of, okay, people, here's the reality. So in my mind, this poem really has a life beyond the book. It's really, the book is about healing my relationship with my mother, but of course, as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, which my mother, she was not the abuser, but she had a part in there. She had a part in my silence. So the healing, the trauma of childhood sexual abuse is in this book, even though I'm not dealing with it as directly as I did in my other book. But this poem really says it all, and I called it Bleed. Interestingly enough, I remember writing some verses while I was sitting in the waiting area of my gynecologist's office. There's a metaphor for you. But I started thinking about blood. I think I was also reading a book at the time about a spellcaster who used blood when she was creating her spells, and I don't think I'm sure that motif has been used throughout fantasy literature many, many times, the idea that spells require blood. So I just, spun off from there, and the poem that I wrote that came out of it is called Bleed. If you seek to find healing, you have what you need, within and around you, but first you must bleed. All spells through the ages, all potions and brews require a payment, and blood's what they choose. A prick of the finger, a slice of the thumb, a slash on the forearm, and magic would come. Nothing worth conjuring comes without pain, so open a vessel and just let it drain. When blood trickles slowly like rubicund beads, follow the outflow, see where it leads. Let the torrent within you surge to a flood. Let the trickles run freely, you still have more blood. The stories within you, the words you must say, mix in your lifeblood and mold them like clay. Face demons and dragons, transform lust and greed. Their flames will not burn you, just remember to bleed. Take the earth that surrounds you, shape the dirt and the mud, cut new blocks to build with, and then add your blood. You'll live out your story in word and in deed. They won't always listen, but they will watch you bleed. Rewrite your history, reimagine your past, your tales still unwritten, your role not yet cast. Weave spells by the thousands. You have all you need. Magic surrounds you. You just have to bleed.